The following is a world-class Bullshitters exclusive.
We're taking a slight detour today. Initially, we were going to talk about Robert Downey Jr. back in the MCU, even after Tony Stark died. But with all this talk of Spider-Man in the news, I figured now would be the perfect time. Now folks, this is part 2 of a 3-part saga. I'll have a link in the description below for part 1, and after you leave this video, go ahead and check it out. It's pretty good. Spider-Man is Marvel's biggest character. No doubt about it. While Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, Black Widow, and 90% of the characters that make up the MCU were all relegated to the B-list status at best of Marvel, Spider-Man was flying high as Marvel's flagship superhero. From comics to cartoons, video games, and toys, if it was a product, Spider-Man was on it. What Spider-Man wasn't on was a movie screen. As far back as 1977, there was an attempt to bring Spidey to cinemas by taking episodes of the live-action TV show, stitching them together, and selling them as a movie. I actually bought into this as a kid. There was this mythic place known as Blockbuster back in the day that offered these plastic rectangles called VHS tapes, or videos as we called them back then. And this is where I found said Spider-Man movie. The incredibly low budget quality of this film didn't throw me off too much, because this was the 90s, and Marvel movies were crap. This was our Captain America film, and somehow I saw the Fantastic Four back in the day too. Marvel had a much lower threshold for quality than DC did. The only place Marvel was on equal footing was TV. X-Men and Spider-Man were a great 1-2 punch to DC's Batman and Superman. It was all because of messy film rights issues, like James Cameron's Almost Spider-Man film with Arnold Schwarzenegger as Doc Ock, and poor business deals that Spider-Man never saw a big theatrical release. Marvel would leverage film rights to stay afloat during trying financial times, and never thought about the future ramifications. This saw their properties divided among a multitude of studios. That's why Spider-Man was from Sony, X-Men from Fox, the Hulk from Universal, and Howard the Duck from Hell. All the DC films came from Warner Brothers, and the WB was able to make the DC heroes, well, let's be honest, they were able to make Batman into the biggest hero of that decade. It wasn't until 2002 when Spider-Man finally hit the big screen. The Sam Raimi trilogy, as it became known, went on to make over $2 billion at the box office and cement Spider-Man as the superhero of the 21st century. You'd think that after decades of production issues, once Spider-Man found that winning formula, they'd keep the momentum going. Well, greed knows no bounds, and of course Hollywood screwed it up. The reboot no one asked for, The Amazing Spider-Man, was released just 5 short years after Spider-Man 3. While fairly successful, everyone was talking about the Avengers that year and why Spider-Man should have been a part of that film. 2 years later, we got the cinematic abortion known as The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and it was only then that Sony had a come-to-Jesus moment. To get us all caught up, let's check out what CinemaBlend had to say. As early as December 2014, a mere 7 months after The Amazing Spider-Man 2's release, conversations between Sony and Marvel Studios were rumored to have taken place. Thanks to this massive email hack that hit the studio around that time, those rumors were verified. It took some initial stumbling and negotiations, but in 2015, Spider-Man was confirmed to be entering the MCU with a debut appearance in Captain America: Civil War. Casting Tom Holland as a teenage Peter Parker, 5 films featuring Spider-Man would come out of this partnership between 2016 and the present, 2 of them being solo efforts. Between the 3 Avengers movie as well as Spider-Man: Homecoming and Far From Home, the Holland films have made more than an estimated $8 billion in the worldwide marketplace. Let me stop there real quick. That's a little fishy at best. I wouldn't call the Avengers movies Spider-Man films and give Tom Holland the credit. So this seems like a nice history lesson, but how is this a problem? The last video covered something that's really an issue with the MCU. Well friends, just last month, that deal between Sony and Marvel fell apart. Did the Marvel Cinematic Universe just lose Spider-Man? Fans reel at the Sony-Disney split, and this comes from the New York Times. Even Spider-Man's webs were not strong enough to hold Sony and Disney together. After months of negotiations over the terms of their partnership on the film franchise, Sony announced on Tuesday that Kevin Feige, who helped steer Disney's Marvel Studios and its Avengers series to immense global success, will no longer play a role in the next live-action Spider-Man movie starring Tom Holland. The news alarmed fans of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, who fear that future big-screen installments of the linked superhero stories would be weakened or even thrown into plot chaos without friendly relations between Sony, which owned the rights to Spider-Man, and Disney, who owns the rest of the Avengers. Could the MCU go on without your friendly neighborhood web-slinger? Sony put the onus for Mr. Feige's departure squarely on Disney. We are disappointed, but respect Disney's decision to have him continue as a lead producer, the company said on Twitter. The news comes after Disney had pushed for better financial terms from Sony, which purchased movie rights to Spider-Man before Disney bought Marvel Comics and its intellectual property. Before the movie starring Mr. Holland as the teenage superhero in the Avengers universe, 2 previous Sony series featuring Tobey Maguire and later Andrew Garfield existed in a time and place when no mention of Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, the Hulk, or other characters who became global phenomenons for Marvel and Disney in 23 movies over 11 years with $22 billion in ticket sales. To be fair, they did mention Doctor Strange and Spider-Man 2. After some of those characters ended their arcs at Avengers Endgame this year, fans pinned their hopes for future storylines on the hints found in Spider-Man Far From Home, which raked in $1 billion this summer, and positioned Spider-Man as the heir to the Avengers mantle. But there are already signs that the future of the Marvel Universe would not rest solely on Spidey's shoulders. In July, Marvel Studios unveiled the next phase of its plans, including a collection of movies and TV shows featuring Thor, Doctor Strange, Black Widow, and other popular characters, but no Spider-Man. I'd like to stop right there and call bullshit. They were definitely setting up Spider-Man to be the lead of the MCU. We all saw Spider-Man Far From Home, and they symbolically made Spider-Man the next Tony Stark. If you believe otherwise, I have a bridge to sell you and some videotapes that can be yours for just 1 penny apiece. In all seriousness, there's a scramble for the next Spider-Man, which is impossible. The character has been out for almost 60 years, and the alternatives that some websites are pushing is just crazy talk. 10 teenage heroes who could replace Spider-Man in the MCU. Number 10, Kate Bishop. Number 9, Shuri from Black Panther. Number 8, Squirrel Girl. Number 7, Iron Lad. Number 6, Nova. Number 5, Miss Marvel. Number 4, The X-Men. Number 3, Johnny Storm. Number 2, Amadeus Cho. Number 1, Ironheart. We'll talk more about her next time. Lists like this make me laugh because it tells me one thing. These people don't get it. I mean, seriously, a bunch of Z-list characters are going to replace Spider-Man? Okay, let's have Super Dave replace Mickey Mouse. Let's have Clutch Cargo replace Cartman from South Park. Do these people even read the damn books? Do they know who Spider-Man actually is? I mean, topics like this, they make me laugh. This is insane. Let me go back a moment and have another laugh. But before I do, let's see who wrote this shit. J. Richland Anderson. Sounds like a Costco brand or a railroad tycoon. So again, we're looking at characters like Ironheart, Amadeus Cho. We already have a Hulk in the MCU. Yeah, his arm's messed up, but do we need another one? Realistically, isn't that going to confuse people? I mean, we all bought in that Dr. Bruce Banner was pelted by gamma rays and turned into the Hulk. But we have another Hulk? Now it's kind of getting stupid, just like in the books. Johnny Storm, we don't have a Fantastic Four yet, and we don't know if Marvel's going to be able to do it just right. Now, the X-Men are awesome, but I don't think they fill the hole left by Spider-Man. Miss Marvel, we're not even going to get into her. Look, this character is not very popular. They'll tell you she is, but she's kind of weird, and she's getting her own TV show. Awesome. But you tell me that a character created within the last 5 years is going to surpass Spider-Man, the brand icon, the Mickey Mouse of Marvel? No. Be honest down in the chat. I don't care what your agenda is. Do you really think this character is going to replace Spider-Man and the billions of dollars that Spider-Man brings in? No, it is not. Nova, yes, he's in Guardians of the Galaxy, well, the Nova Corps is, but I highly doubt they're going to go and replace Spider-Man. Iron Lad, you've never heard of him. Squirrel Girl, damn joke. Shuri, she's part of the Black Panther. People like her. She's not going to be as popular as Spider-Man. People are going to go, who? Kind of like that Star-Lord moment. And finally, Kate Bishop, she's going to be in the Hawkeye TV show. But if you honestly think that Spider-Man is going to be replaced by some woman with a bow and arrow in terms of popularity and cultural relevance, well, let's talk another time. Actually, let's not. So these people just think that the teenage aspect is all Spider-Man is about, right? It shows what they know. These are the types of people that keep Spider-Man uninteresting and stop the character from reaching the full potential. I know, I'm a Spider-Man fan, forgive me. I've spent a lot of time reading the books, watching the shows, movies, etc. It's all my fault for expecting more out of people. In reality, all I expect for them is to crack open a comic or watch the Spectacular Spider-Man. Then they'll understand the character. The cultural value of Spider-Man can't be interchanged with any other comic book character. Superman himself cannot replace Spider-Man's cultural worth. I know it sounds grandiose, but these characters are our American myths. To be fair, they're beyond that. They're universal in their appeal. And some fly-by-night jabroni who's age-appropriate can't fill the gap left by Spider-Man. That's another bonus Marvel problem that the publishing arm of the company faces. They don't respect the iconic characters. They figure they're interchangeable and people will buy the books because they say Marvel. Newsflash, people stop buying the books because they say Marvel. The comic arm of the brand is a cesspool no one wants. The writers are producing crap, the art is mostly as good as always, and the editors are just not customer friendly. Any hardships they face will be brought upon themselves, and the decline in Marvel properties moving forward will be because they chose to adapt the last 5 years of the brand. The worst Marvel has ever had to offer. So you're probably asking yourself, what is the actual Spider-Man situation? We already know how important Spider-Man is, Jeff. I'm glad you do. The Spider-Man situation has been convoluted at best. There's reporting biases, people are coming to the defense of a company because they made them happy as a kid. It's all a big mess. Surprisingly, our friend, Scott Mendelson has a pretty fair assessment of the situation. Spider-Man. Sony and Marvel no longer need each other. Spider-Man Far From Home arrives on digital HD this morning, following a robust theatrical run. That made it Sony's third biggest domestic gross ever. Yes, Sony needs Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends as an ongoing film franchise, but do they need Marvel for Spider-Man to soar accordingly? The simple facts of this Sony-Marvel divorce is that it made sense for Sony to maintain the current terms, but less sense for Sony to agree to Disney's terms. That's not to paint Disney as the villain here, even though they are, as the alleged deal, depending on who you ask, 30 to 50% of the production budget in exchange for 30 to 50% of the profits, wasn't money for nothing. But considering how reliant Sony is on the profits from their Spider-Verse movies, yes, Amazing Spider-Man made up 19% of their 2012 grosses, while Venom and Spider-Verse represented 47% of their 2018 grosses. It's a calculated risk that 100% profits from an MCU-less Spider-Man series is worth more than 50 to 70% of the profits from an affiliated Spider-Man series. Sony has shown via Spider-Man Far From Home and Spider-Man Homecoming that it can make, with Kevin Feige's help, a well-reviewed and well-received Peter Parker movie. Sony has shown via Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse that it can make a critically adored, crowd-pleasing, and Oscar-winning Spider-Man movie without Marvel's help. Venom shows that Sony can pull off an $856 million grossing spin-off despite lousy reviews without the MCU brand. Sure, we shouldn't expect Morbius to pull in that kind of money next summer. Even if Spider-Man 3 Homeless only earns Amazing Spider-Man money, that would be great on an over-under budget of $170 million. I have long argued that the biggest problem with the Amazing Spider-Man movies was their budget. Yes, I hated The Amazing Spider-Man. It was a grimdark remake of the Sam Raimi original, and liked The Amazing Spider-Man 2 more than you, save for the fans, Gwen Stacy's murder, which killed off the franchise's most popular character. But Sony spent $235 million on Amazing Spider-Man in 2012, right between the $225 million Avengers and the $250 million Dark Knight Rises, and $255 million for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 in 2014. Sony was in a different place in late 2014. They had just been hacked and their private emails spread all over the internet. A massive cybercrime that was treated by the media with all the seriousness of a slumber party prank. They had taken a hit when The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was poorly reviewed and had flatlined in North America, which capsized their alleged plans for a multi-pronged Spider-Man cinematic universe. Marvel was doing fine, but the media was treating Avengers Age of Ultron's billion-dollar gross like a failure, which didn't help. Marvel didn't need Spider-Man, but he was a nice bonus boost to Phase 3, which would be more dependent on new franchises. Spider-Man's inclusion in the MCU helped rejuvenate the brand for Sony. Moreover, Parker's inclusion into Captain America Civil War, and especially the Avengers Infinity War, was a key variable in those films' respective blockbuster success. If we concede that Sony now doesn't need the Marvel brand to get folks to show up for a Spider-Man movie, especially if it's well-liked as Homecoming, Venom, and the Spider-Verse, and Far From Home, we must also concede that Marvel doesn't need Spider-Man. Iron Man, Spidey's main connection to the MCU, is dead, and Feige has gone on record several times stating that Captain Marvel would be the new leader/focal point going forward. That'll put butts in seats. If Marvel can keep knocking out bigger hits with the likes of the Eternals and Shang-Chi, they don't really need Spider-Man anymore than they did in the first 8 years of the MCU. And if Sony can trust the audience to show up for a Spider-Man movie, or a Spider-Man-related film, without an explicit connection to the MCU, if anything, Far From Home's mid-credit cliffhanger is the perfect cutoff for Peter's palling around with the Avengers. The disconnect can allow Holland's Spidey to escape from Iron Man's shadow, while the lack of Spider-Man will only force Marvel to double down on new franchises. The short-lived partnership was mutually beneficial when both companies needed a pick-me-up. Yes, Marvel would have been fine with only Black Panther popping up in Civil War, but Spider-Man sure as hell helped. Sony may well be okay with a $160 million budgeted Amazing Spider-Man 3, but the reboot they got with Marvel's help worked like a charm. But Sony can make a decent blockbuster superhero movie without the Marvel brain trust, and Marvel has both a deluge of untapped characters and a track record of making A-level movie stars out of C-list characters. Fans may want Sony and Marvel to get back together, but it was a relationship of mutual convenience that has outlived its usefulness. So now's the part where I get to tell you what I think. The best Spider-Man films came from Sony. The worst Spider-Man films came from Sony. Obviously, Spider-Man 1 and 2 are fantastic, but from Spider-Man 3 through the Amazing series, Spider-Man was a joke. It epitomized corporate greed, ineptitude, and all-around bad filmmaking. It wasn't until I saw Into the Spider-Verse that my faith was restored in Sony. Into the Spider-Verse was so fresh, so fun, and so beautiful that I completely forgot about Spider-Man Far From Home, a film that I genuinely enjoyed and couldn't wait to see the next installment of. I think Into the Spider-Verse showed me that there can be a great film based on a comic book that doesn't feel as manufactured as some of the MCU films. Looking back on the MCU as a whole, I don't retroactively hate the films just because I hated how Endgame turned out and lament the future of the series. I feel that the MCU was the greatest cinematic comic achievement, but I never felt they did Spider-Man justice. The movies felt like slightly tighter versions of an Andrew Garfield film. Instead of dark and gritty, we got goofy and stupid. Yeah, Spider-Man is a lighthearted character overall, but they completely erase the gravitas from the character. There's no Uncle Ben, no power and or responsibility, just a kid with superpowers that has no real-world problems outside of getting the girl. Everything that made Spider-Man was wiped away. Yes, he made jokes, but if you want an asshole in a red suit with little substance and one-liners galore, well, go watch Deadpool 2. There's so much more to the character of Spider-Man that Disney left out, and you know what? Sony did it better. Go back and watch Spider-Man 1 and 2. That feeling you get in the pit of your stomach when Peter walks away from Mary Jane in the cemetery just because he knows she'll be in danger if they're together is exactly the dour yet heroic ending of the best Spider-Man comics. The scene when Peter gives up what he wants for himself because he's the hero, that's Spider-Man. When Miles found out his uncle is the Prowler and then dies in his arms only for his dad to discover his body, that's Spider-Man. Sitting on a bus and accidentally calling in a drone strike because you're wearing Iron Man sunglasses, that isn't Spider-Man. Letting everyone know your secret identity for the sake of a last-minute joke, well, that isn't Spider-Man either. Whatever Disney produced in those 2 solo films, that's not Spider-Man. And I, for one, am happy that it's over. So folks, I know that's a controversial hot take, but that's how I feel. I'm a big Spider-Man fan, and I have a lot of problems with the way the MCU portrays the character, but I don't think they're bad films. I think they're better than the Amazing films, and yeah, better than Spider-Man 3. But Spider-Man 3 does have some moments of greatness. I hate to say it, but I think I might agree with Scott Mendelson. These companies don't need each other anymore. We're living in a pretty okay time for Spider-Man across the board. We don't have a good cartoon. The comics are, at best, but we have some great merchandise. So if you're like me, you love the toys. But I gotta say, to be a Spider-Man fan in the early to mid 2000s was probably the golden age. You had great games, you had great comics, you had awesome toys, you had a great cartoon in the Spectacular Spider-Man. You pretty much put Spider-Man in something and you had a level of quality that wasn't matched by any other superhero at the time. Now, yes, I do think the newest Spider-Man video game is the best. Yes, better than Spider-Man 2. Everybody loves that game, but the PS4 one's superior in every way. No pun intended. But I guess if I'm trying to say anything at all, it's that I'm actually excited for where we're going to go with Spider-Man. Like, I'm genuinely happy that we have an open idea of what we can do with Spider-Man. He doesn't need to fit in the MCU's mold anymore. I loved Spider-Man Far From Home's ending, especially with the return of J. Jonah Jameson, played by J.K. Simmons. I literally cheered like I was at a sporting event. And I tell you these things because I don't want you to think I hate everything. I don't. I love pop culture. I love Spider-Man. I love comic books. And the thing is, to watch them die a horrible death at the hands of people who don't understand it, well, it pisses me off. I mean, comic book characters and all of these other pop culture achievements are very important. You know, to preserve a character like Spider-Man is as important as restoring a historic painting. You know, this character has so much meaning to so many people, myself included, and it's not fair to watch it fall apart for stupid reasons. You know, not everyone that makes a Spider-Man movie knows what they're doing, especially Mark Webb. And I'll never get tired of making fun of the Amazing films. Yes, the second one had a damn good costume. Doesn't make a great movie. But that's it for today, folks. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you guys check out part 1 of the Marvel problem with Magneto. I think that's a bigger problem than people are letting on. People want to play the middle ground. Oh, it's no big deal. You can make him black. Watch the video and find out why you can't. It's just not possible. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and share it all over social media. If you're a super fan of this channel and you want to help us grow and change the world of entertainment, check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/worldclassbs. We offer all kinds of awesome tiers, video content, shout outs, you can be on the show, a t-shirt, you name it. Just check it out. It's a lot of fun. Also, if you're involved in community, well, check out our Facebook page. We got a lot of great people over there, a great community. The Fandom Menace is the best online geek culture community. A lot of great people, a lot of smart content creators. You'll make a good friend, talk about entertainment, and have some fun. So folks, thank you for watching, and as always, go out into the world and be excellent to each other. Oh, and don't forget about part 3 coming very, very soon, where we discuss Robert Downey Jr.'s reintroduction to the MCU and why it's a hollow cash grab, just like a couple other things in the MCU. Spider-Man Homecoming.